All right. So hi, everyone. I'm Renee Carterell, and I'm going to introduce to you Ross Keyes, who is here today to talk to us about Christian nationalism. Ross is from Bismarck. He worked in the federal government for nearly 30 years, holding a number of positions for Congressman Earl Pomeroy and Senators Heidi Heitkamp and Ken Conrad, including State Director, Deputy State Director, Outreach Director, and Mobile Office Coordinator. Ross has crisscrossed the state with each and had the opportunity to help North Dakotans on a number of issues. More recently, Ross helped develop and was the executive director of the North Dakota Voices Network and is now working to build the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota. So I am going to switch my screen over so that Ross can present and be pinned. And Ross, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you, Renee. And congrats, you have got a nice turnout here for an inaugural event. Every time we do things like this, you're always crossing your finger, oh man, can I get critical mass, which is like maybe 12 on something like this. And then when you get, what do you have here, 30, 36. Wonderful, wonderful turnout. So thank you for having me. Question for you, Renee. How many folks on here, like, do you know, or how many are new to you?
I know a lot of people.
Okay.
I'd say about 2/3 of them I know.
Okay. Pretty friendly confines for you then. That is terrific. Well, good. So yeah, Renee knows Pastor Gretchen Graff up in Grand Forks, and Pastor Gretchen Graff happens to be the president of the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota board. And the two of them were, in a dark, smoky room hatching plots. And Renee says, oh, she needs someone to speak. And Gretchen goes, ha, 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 I've got the guy. So that's how this happened. And I've spoken on this a couple of times before. I'm not a Guthrie Graves Fitzsimmons or an Andrew Seidel or Seidel, I got to pronounce that right. I'm in my son's bedroom back in Bismarck, North Dakota. He's living down in Minneapolis, so this is my office these days. But anyway, I've been asked to speak around the state a few times now on Christian nationalism, but more so not just on that, but how it's implemented. What does it actually mean on the ground? And Renee also said, hey, could we go over some things that we can do to address this? How, and in this case, in particular, rural areas, and I'll speak from experience in North Dakota throughout this. What can we do? Because it seems overwhelming right now. But first, in order to, I think, help you understand why I value some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, I need to explain what I've been doing since Heidi lost, Senator Heitkamp. Shortly after that, we created something called the North Dakota Voices Network. It was a variety of progressive organizations and individuals that came together to deal with a state that has essentially taken a dark turn toward immigrants, the LGBTQ community, women's rights, social safety net, democracy, and decency itself. So this North Dakota Voices Network was tasked with pulling together as many organizations that kind of held the same beliefs. North Dakota Women's Network, Native Vote in North Dakota, labor organizations, including North Dakota United. It used to be North Dakota Education Association and Public Employees, so the Teachers Union, and the ACLU has been fantastic. We've got a great partner in state in the ACLU, and the Voices Network met monthly, except during the sessions. We've got 4-month sessions. We're in the middle of one right now, every other year. And then we would meet weekly, and we'd pull all of these partners together and share best practices. We'd share intel, events, amplify each other's messages. And it has really, really, really been successful. And I say that because these organizations are going to come in conversation a little bit later. But in order to change hearts and minds, we thought more was needed. So we started pulling together lay and ordained faith leaders who believe in religious freedom. And we created the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota, from scratch, kind of like Renee, what you're doing here. Just, I went around asking people, who should I pull in? Who do I need to meet? And eventually it started to all fall together. And the Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota's community of ordained and lay faith leaders who are committed to fostering social, economic, and environmental justice in North Dakota. And like the other effort, I share toolkits, information. We all share each other's events so that we can go and support. And hopefully we're helping amplify each other's messages. And I also give them opportunities. A pastor up in Rugby has probably never thought to himself, oh, I could do a letter to the editor on this. Or, I could actually submit something online to the legislature. And so some of these things are out of their wheelhouse normally, and that's what we're trying to provide. So we've been doing monthly Zoom briefings for the past 2 years. We've covered things like abortion, restorative justice, environment, although that was mainly pipelines, public education, climate change, LGBTQ bills at the legislative session, the Middle East, immigration, and many other current issues. So it's been going great, and really been a pleasure. The talent that I've found in North Dakota with these faith leaders is off the charts. But tonight is Christian nationalism. Let me start sharing my screen. I'm not going to share a lot of stuff, just kind of an outline of items on share screen. And it's nothing fancy. I'll just kind of scroll through this. But Christian nationalism, as you can see, and I've kind of pieced this together from other places and added a few bits of my own. You can see all sorts of examples of what people call Christian nationalism. Basically, it's a belief that the American nation is defined by Christianity and that the government must enact laws to reflect this Christian heritage. Christian nationalists are determined to rewrite our history and create a government that values fundamental Christianity above all other religions, and a system of laws from local to federal levels that disfavors the non-religious, religious minorities, women, people of color, and the LGBTQ community. A little bit deeper, Christian nationalists operate according to several core beliefs. America was founded as a white Christian nation. I added a word there. As a white Christian nation. The founders were Christians who steeped our Constitution in the Bible, and the government should take steps to keep the country's Christian roots and identity intact. The Bible is the inerrant, infallible Word of God. Because it's infallible, it is God's perfect law and the basis for Christian nationalists' definition of morality. But as what we're seeing now, whenever a human law conflicts with God's law, it is a Christian nationalist's job to overrule the human law and replace it with God's law. The government should advocate Christian values and pass laws and enact policies that reflect those values. Of course, one of the things this means is that you don't compromise. But if that must be done, the end goal is still always a goal. So we've seen compromise on abortion, LGBTQ issues in North Dakota anyway, and book bans. They aimed for the fences on the book bans last time. They got pushed back, and they're coming back again in 2025 on book bans again. So they may swing for the fences out of the gate and lose, but trust me, they will take every little piece of field until they reach that fence. Another part about Christian nationalism, white Christian males are at the top of the food chain. And finally, with my notes, in order to be a good American, you must be a specific type of Christian. In order to be a good American, if you're not part of this Christian nationalism movement, if you're not part of the churches that they believe are part of that, you're not a good American. So we'll break this down to Tish more. Am I going too fast? Is this good speed?
I think it's good.
Okay. What I'm going to do, by the way, so you got Christian Christian nationalism up here, kind of this, okay, here's this theory. But I want to point out how it's having an impact. It had an impact today up at the state legislature in Bismarck. And it's going to have an impact tomorrow at the state legislature in Bismarck. So I want to go from Christian nationalism to their playbook to what I'm seeing on the ground. And you can relay that to what's happening in Minnesota or where you're calling in from. But first, we've got to kind of, to get to that, I've got to just explain a little bit more about this format that they're working under. There's the New Apostolic Reformation that some of you have probably heard about, or Dominionism. But the one I want to talk about is the Seven Mountain Mandate. How many folks have heard of that? Seven Mountains Mandate. Okay, so some haven't, some have. Now this was, this just started gaining traction about 12, 13 years ago with a book. I forget what it is, but it's really been around since the probably 70s. Christian nationalism and the components of Christian nationalism have been around for a couple hundred years, but now the folks are starting to, oh, okay, let's put a plan to this, let's put a name to that. And the Seven Mountains of Influence is it's something that is caught on like wildfire. Let me put it like that, as part of Christian nationalism. And it says that Seven Mountain Mandate, the belief that one branch of Christianity enjoys favored status with God and is destined to take over seven spheres of influence in society. So Christian nationalism, the Christian nationalists believe that they are not only destined, but they must take over family, government, education, media, arts and entertainment, business, and religion. And you're going, what? I mean, who really believes in this stuff? It seems like a bunch of words so far. Well, let me tell you who really believes in the Seven Mountain Mandate. Televangelist, and I love using that word to describe her. Televangelist Paula White Cain, for one. She is returning to the White House as a special government employee and senior advisor of the newly created White House Faith Office. She believes in this. A couple of names you probably don't know. I didn't know these names. Jim Garlow and Mario Bramnick, former evangelical advisors to Trump, who were instrumental in sparking the Christian rage that led to January 6th, believe in this. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson believes in this. And a name, I'm curious how many people have heard of this name. Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA. Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA. I'd write that name down and just kind of keep an eye on that. Charlie Kirk is establishing a presence on as many college campuses in this country as possible to spread this. And he's been in North Dakota, and I think they have fairly good presence in probably at least 3 colleges in this state right now. Probably more. I don't know. So let's drill down a little bit. So Christian nationalism, Seven Mountains of Influence. Hey, we're supposed to take over these 7 areas. How are we going to do that? Let's put together a plan. That's what they did. The Heritage Foundation, along with a number of others, thought it'd be a good idea to put all this together, and they came up with Project 2025. Project 2025 is the plan to enact Christian nationalism in this country. And it is very specific in areas, a little broader in some others. But I'll go through these one by one. Family. So what are they mandated to do, and what is in their plan? Spelled out. Withhold access to reproductive and gender-affirming health care. Also, and this isn't something that's spelled out, but it last time I gave this was right prior to the election. The attacks on Kamala Harris for not having children of her own and on Taylor Swift for being single were pretty noticeable to me. That's because the primary role for women is motherhood in Christian nationalism. J.D. Vance's funder, Peter Thiel, has stated he doesn't believe women should be allowed to vote. Also impacting the family. Repeal non-statutory sexual orientation and gender identity non-discrimination conditions on agency grants for adoption. Restricting the ability for LGBTQ plus families and single parents to adopt and foster children. Also, and this is directly in the pages of that 900-page plan, Project 2025, they will delete terms such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender equity, and reproductive health from, this is a quote, every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, and piece of legislation that exists, end quote. Also under family conversion therapy would be recognized as an authorized practice. Excuse me? Oh, was there a question?
I think somebody just came off speaker.
Okay, already. And I'm fine taking questions during, so if you want to hop in, feel free. So let's go to point number 2 here, government. Well, the thing about Christian nationalism, and you saw this after 2020, elections must be rigged if God's chosen isn't elected. And if you think about that, it leads me to wonder where we're heading in 2028. Control of the Supreme Court is critical. We see where that's at. They've got both houses right now. But the interesting part that we've been seeing is the administration, the executive branch of government. The actions taken have been breathtaking. I cannot, as someone who worked in a federal office building for 30 years, I cannot believe how fast this has happened. And this is all a playbook, and these executive orders had been written down a long time in advance by people who knew exactly where they wanted to attack. So we're seeing thousands upon thousands of people being laid off, even scarily in the FAA. And I know Minnesota just had an accident with a plane that flew into Toronto, ended up upside down. But also, government control also is represented by the gerrymandering that you've seen. North Dakota, we've had it. I assume Minnesota has it. And creating roadblocks to voting. North Dakota has one of the best examples in creating roadblocks to voting after Senator Heitkamp won the 2012 election and Native American population got out to vote to support Senator Heitkamp. The next couple of sessions in the legislature had bills that were directed to make it much more difficult for Native Americans to vote in our state. Point number 3, education. And if you can control education, you've really got your hands around the throat of democracy. And this is where a lot of very, very serious attacks are taking place. At the top of this, school vouchers. They're promoting school vouchers across the country that would drain money from public education, sending it to schools that parents pick or already have their kids in, schools that lack any accountability on who they choose to serve. In North Carolina, a massive school voucher program is funneling millions to private schools, 88% of which are religious. This one school has received nearly $600,000 in voucher aid so far and states that its purpose is to, quote, raise the next generation of leaders who will transform the heart of our nation by equipping students to enter the 7 mountains of influence, end quote. So they're training kids to put Project 2025 in place and Christian nationalism. Education, the document also says they're going to eliminate the Department of Education, and we've seen some rumblings from Trump himself on that recently. Interesting there. Yeah. A quick personal story, if I may here. I know a family, quite conservative, probably voted for Trump the last 3 elections that they could. They have a child who needed just a little more push, had some challenges, and the child was going to a private religious school. They worked with the private religious school to see if they could get that extra little bit of support, an IEP put in place for the child, and got absolutely nowhere, nowhere. This very conservative family took this child out and placed the child into public education, night and day. Public education, Department of Education, you've got accountability, you have requirements, and child has an IEP, and latest I heard was flourishing. More under education. I don't believe I mentioned that Project 2025 wants to eliminate Head Start. Black and white, God forbid we give all kids some sort of opportunity to start out on some sort of equal footing. Book bans, also very important in education, even asserting that librarians and teachers should be forced to register as sex offenders for purveying pornography, which we have seen includes anything involving LGBTQ language or themes. It also calls for abolishing the teaching of critical race theory and gender ideology in public schools. Some of these will be a little bit quicker now. Media. Project 2025 proposes to strip public broadcasting of its funding and legal status, and would re-examine the relationship between the White House and the Correspondents Association. Maybe you saw that the AP was recently kicked out of an event and not allowed onto Air Force One to fly with the president for something. I think they didn't refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. Number 5 on the list, arts and entertainment. Heritage Foundation wants to eliminate funding for the National Endowment for the Arts. And we have a new chairman at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Guess who that is? Business. 2 key points to keep in mind here. Tax cuts, and 2, weaker federal oversight. Safety standards, clean air, clean water, land reclamation. So a lot of the things that were being that Elon Musk was being investigated for, those people have been fired and he's no longer being investigated for them. Finally, religion. Project 2025 would rescind regulations that make certain religious organizations ineligible for SBA loans. In other words, we're seeing if you're of the right Christian nationalism religion, you're going to see a flow of federal dollars, taxpayer dollars, where there had been a church and state separation. That church and state separation will no longer be. Project 2025 also says the federal government should maintain a biblically based definition of marriage and family, and should allow organizations that believe that marriage exists only between a man and a woman to affirm that view in healthy marriage programs subsidized by taxpayer funds. So those are the 7 mountains of influence that the goal is to essentially take over and put the imprint of Christian nationalism on America through these 7 mountains. We're seeing this in North Dakota. In fact, we're ground zero over here in North Dakota. And I know that there are rural areas in Minnesota that are feeling the same way and seeing the exact same things. There was recently a poll that came out and says, North Dakota is the most supportive state of Christian nationalism in the country. We ranked first alongside Mississippi And let me repeat to you the questions that were asked. So 50% of North Dakotans polled responded in an affirmative manner to these questions. 1, the US government should declare America a Christian nation. 2, US laws should be based on Christian values. 3, if the US moves away from our Christian foundations, we will not have a country anymore. 4, being Christian is an important part of being truly American. And 5, God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. 50% of North Dakotans responding to that said, yeah, that's good by me. So in North Dakota, here's what we're seeing. 2023, we had 20 plus bills targeting our LGBTQ family, friends, and neighbors in the legislative session. Book banning efforts started a couple of years ago, and we have one right now, Senate Bill 2307, that we're fighting. We have chapters in North Dakota of Moms for Liberty. Do you know if there are any Moms for Liberty in Minnesota?
Yeah, we have a chapter in Wright County, and there's several others.
Several others. So we've got a couple here. At last I heard we have a couple here, and they're up in the northwest part. Let me just say a couple of things about Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty in another state hosted a speaker after that speaker was banned from Twitter for saying, quote, let's start rounding up people who participate in pride events, end quote. That's Moms for Liberty. A local chapter in New Hampshire offered a $500 bounty for any parent who caught a teacher using critical race theory in the classroom. So it's some pretty extremist thought that is being reflected in these Moms for Liberty chapters. So it's a really good idea to keep an eye on that. Christian Nationalism in North Dakota, they've been running for school boards, city commissions, county commissions, state legislators, and the Department of Public Instruction candidate who was defeated in the primary was an avowed Christian nationalist. Pay attention to party platforms and resolutions. We had one that was a doozy a couple of years ago. I got about 15, 16, 17 state organizations to join me in a letter to the editor that we sent around the state and that we sent to Huffington Post out in DC or New York. And they started doing an investigation. They started calling like the state chair, the Republican Party chair, who after all this attention disavowed the resolutions on their own party platform and said, no, that doesn't reflect us at all. They were so offensive. In North Dakota, we are now seeing 6 or 7 bills on school vouchers, and I really think that's a critical component to all of this. And I hope that we can beat them back. And school vouchers, education savings accounts, things that take money from public education where you've got oversight and rules, and put them into pots of money where that just all goes away. And we've been having our fair share of speakers. I mentioned Charlie Kirky's been in North Dakota. Dr. James Lindsay, who's funded by Christian Nationalists, has been here. Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, has been in North Dakota. So like I say, it's ground zero. Now the fun stuff. Any questions on that before we get to the part I really like talking about?
And I want to let you know it's 7:45, and
Okay.
If people want to ask questions, that's fine, but you can also put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of when Ross is done talking. So 2 alternatives.
Sounds good. And my voice is hanging in there, Renee, so the hot chocolate has been perfect. Okay, so you're going to see all sorts of experts say, here's what you need to do. You know, they're going to have stuff in books, they're going to have them on their webinars, and it's going to be all over the place. The last one I was on with Andrew Seidel, his big deal on Project 2025 was talk about it. Talk about it. The more people know about it, the more they dislike it. It polls horribly in this country. And I think what we're seeing on the ground is reflecting that. But so I sat back and I used to have I used to have folks like you come to my office when I was state director for Senator Heitkamp. And so between that and working with the organizations I've been working with, and that's why I want to bring them in, here's some things that I'd like to go through bit by bit with you. So one by one, we've learned about Christian nationalism, we've learned about their playbook, and we've learned here's what they're doing in our towns to make that a reality. So what do? One, stay engaged. But I want you to really pay attention to the second part here, but please take care of yourself. I've I've seen really good friends go into a legislative session. Um, one was an LGBTQ activist, and it was really painful. It was really hurtful. And I've seen some other friends who just, want to hit the road running 100 miles per hour for 2 sessions, and then they disappeared. They're still in the state, but burnout's a real deal. Burnout's a real deal, and some of these things are hard, and your mental health is important. So stay engaged, but take care of yourself. And you've got friends around that I'm sure you can in these circles, just like this. We're in this together. Stay informed, find good sources of information, fact check misinformation. Make sure that what you've got, what you put it on social media is good stuff. Don't go with rumors. Leave that to Fox News or something else. Inform others. Number three, inform others. Social media. And I'll use my own example. I'm not good at social media, by the way. In fact, I kind of get the icks when I deal with a lot of it. But every now and then I'll reach out. I've got some really good friends, good people, salt of the earth, give you the shirt off their back. And every now and then they'll put something on social media that is really offensive and is not based in truth. And so I'll go to Snopes.com or fact check or something, and I'll find something that they can understand that points out what you put on wasn't accurate, but I'm not going to beat them over the head with it. I'm not going to take a 2x4 to them. They're good folks. And so I just go, hey, ran into something that addresses this post you put up and just thought you'd be interested. Seems like that issue wasn't quite the way it was depicted, or maybe that was solved or something like that. But it's just, hey, thought I'd like to share this with you. And the response I get is a lot better than if I go, damn, that was a dumb post. Why'd you do that? Letters to the editor for informing others. It's not easy. They don't have the impact they used to have, but I would like to point something out. Back in the old days, when Earl and Heidi and I would drive around the state, let's say we were trying to get support for the Violence Against Women Act, okay, back in '94, the very first one. And it, it didn't have 100% support. In fact, the Republican alternative bill eliminated that section altogether. So I put together a series of visits around North Dakota. We visited almost every single women's shelter in the state. And then we pulled the directors together for a public meeting with other law enforcement people in the area and other interested parties. And we'd have a really good discussion about the value of those shelters and of those services. And we'd get newspaper coverage, and quite often we'd get editorials around the state. And we used those editorials and newspapers as third-party validation. We were there, we did this, it's work that we think is good. These days, it's kind of weird with social media. You can put a letter to the editor that gets printed in the Bismarck Tribune, put it on your Facebook site, and it's kind of like it's third-party validation, even though it's someone's opinion. So it's got a little bit more oomph to it than it did back in the old days when we never would consider putting a letter to the editor in a newspaper ad or anything like that. And I'll give you an example. Right before the election, there's a woman named Dina Butcher, D-I-N-A, you can look it up, Dina Butcher, lifelong Republican, real good friend. She's one of the badass grandmas in North Dakota, if you know that group. She's one of the co-founders of the Badass Grandmas. She wrote a letter, an op-ed that appeared in several papers in the state. Um, it was talking about the similarities she was seeing now with what her family went through when her dad, she hadn't been born yet, she was born in the US, but when her dad was picked up during the night of Kristallnacht. And she simply, just said, this happened, and now this is happening. This happened, and this is happening. And it got into a publication. Some of you might know this, in the Fergus Falls area. The High Plains Reader out of Fargo. The High Plains Reader played it, and it exploded on Facebook. Hottest thing in North Dakota. It exploded. Hundreds and hundreds of shares and dozens more. Hundreds just from that site itself. So I don't know if it changed anyone's votes, but it was a damn important thing to say. It was really good to have that in the public discourse. Other way of informing others, we're still on 3 here. Something we did, and Renee, this is, you'll have known about this. In Grand Forks, there were a couple of church groups that got together with, up there, it's called ERA Now, Equal Rights Amendment Now. And they had got a hold of a copy of the film God and Country. And they thought, hey, let's show this film to the public. They did it at the big old Empire Theater downtown. And they followed it with a Q&A of about 4 local pastors and me. And I'm not a pastor. I'm not affiliated with a church or a religion. I'm a hopeful agnostic. So that's why when I say the non-religious, I'm in that group. But they showed it. We had a panel discussion. There was Q&A. It was fantastic. We had well over 100 people at this. And it wasn't that hard to do. So we followed it up in Bismarck. As you're thinking of informing others, 2 churches here, a Lutheran church and a UCC, brought in Postcards from Babylon and Bad Faith, showed those at different times. After one of them, we all got into roundtables and answered pre-listed questions. Wonderful discussions, good turnout. I wasn't at one of them. I don't know if they had a panel discussion or if they did the roundtable thing again, but it was a really good way to educate the public and give them material that they can go and educate others with themselves. And you want to be able to do that. You want to drop the pebble so many times from different people in the lake that all of these little currents start to hit each other. Okay, moving on. Number 4, find organizations that share your values. And that's what's been critical in North Dakota. There's local, statewide, regional, national organizations. Most of the LGBTQ organizations in Bismarck or North Dakota, for example, are local. So I work with Missouri River Rainbow Seniors in Bismarck and Dakota Outright here, but there are others all over the state. There's a statewide North Dakota Human Rights Coalition that kind of brings them all together, along with some other groups. There's good labor efforts in the state. Housing, ACLU, like I said, has someone fantastic in North Dakota. Or maybe it's regional. Gender justice is out of your guys' state. But they have someone in North Dakota, and they've been really, really critically helpful. They've been in committee rooms for us, making the changes on some of these bills that we need watered down. So gender justice has played a big role in North Dakota. Then there's groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State that I'm now friends with. Interfaith Alliance in DC, who provides me with toolkits that I can pass out to my partners across North Dakota. So find these organizations and then reach out and make a connection. How can they help you? Information, toolkits, get on their mailing lists. I know you're already on too many. I get it. I'm on the same too many as you guys are, but every now and then I'll get something from Red Wine and Blue. You guys heard of Red Wine and Blue? I love it just for the title. But you get on that list, and every now and then you're going to get an offer to join Heather Cox Richardson for an evening and listen to her talk about current issues. And if you haven't heard Heather Cox Richardson talk about issues, you want to get on that list. Seriously. But it's
Ross,
more
it's
about
2 minutes to 8, just FY.
oh, okay. Okay.
You're doing great. You could take a little longer, but I think there's some questions too that
Okay.
people have.
And I can stay late. But okay. How can you help them? These organizations that are doing such good work, sometimes they're a one-person shop. Cody Schuler has to drive from Fargo and work the legislature all by himself. He's got to reach out to the communities in North Dakota from ACLU by himself. He's got to find spots. He's got to get bodies there. Well, maybe you reach out to him and he wants to do I'm going to give North Dakota examples. He wants to do a visit in Valley City, North Dakota. Well, I know exactly where he can go. I know the 10 people that he wants to meet, and I can help him out. Can you do that too? Do you have skills that would be useful? These organizations are always looking for some support. They may need help placing a letter to the editor. Stay in touch with them. And they also have, by the way, connections for those who want to run. League of Women Voters. If you're not connected with League of Women Voters, I hope you are. We've got a terrific group in this state. Farmers Union often does trainings on how to run. Education over there would be ME, Minnesota Education, correct? Okay, I'll keep cruising. Number 5, get to know your government and participate. Where do your interests lie? Maybe it's just book bans. You're going, they're freaking me out. They're going to take To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, check out some school board meetings. Have you ever considered being on a library board? That's where some of the action is right now. Maybe you're interested in wind energy development. Right now, it's all about siting. And county commissions have a lot to do with where clean energy can and can't go. The local level, by the way, the school boards, the city commissions, the county commissions, that's been the focus of Christian nationalists for decades. And if you want to fight back, get on that school board. But first, get to know your government and participate. Get comfortable submitting testimony. Go to a couple of county commission meetings, and after a couple, and they're talking about they don't want to allow wind energy or solar energy in your county, get up and say a few words. Get used to it so that you're comfortable. In North Dakota, by the way, we've got the easiest system to provide online testimony at the state legislature. And I've been getting faith leaders from around the state submitting testimony, and it has been going great. So get used to the mechanisms of government. 6, let your elected officials know of your concerns. How many of you know your state legislators over there? Okay, got a few. Be it something they're at. It might even be a groundbreaking in your area. Introduce yourself. When you've got issues, call their offices. Write them. Email. And all of them have different ways of responding, or most of them will put calls pretty high. Personal letters, pretty high. 2,000 postcards that aren't unique, pretty low. Emails, it depends on the office. It really does. But if you're not getting any response there, stop by their office. If they've got a local regional office, stop by their office with your letter, your packet of information. Say, hey, I just wanted you to know this. It's very important to me. We always had people doing that in our offices. If you're part of an organization, bring your leadership for a meeting. Take photos, put it on your webpage. They normally pay attention to that because if you go that far, they're going to think to themselves, and this happened to me, they're going to think to themselves, okay, if they came here and they took photos, are they going to put that on their webpage, or are they going to give it to a newspaper? So you get a little bit more of a response when you approach them like that. If they ignore you, then go ahead and do something with the media. Do a letter to the editor expressing their lack of attention to you and your issue. You can do a press statement about your visit if you're with an organization. If it gets really bad, I've seen press conferences outside federal buildings. We have 100 letters here that Senator X would not see us to talk about. We want to alert you that this is a critical issue, and then you've got another person that has had some interaction with that senator. They may not answer you, but man, they're paying attention. I can guarantee you that. They're probably looking out the window at you as you're doing it. And another interesting one that we're going to explore here in Bismarck, I think, in the very near future, request a town hall. We have a U.S. senator that hasn't held a town hall since 2011 in this state. And yet we've got all of these executive orders coming down. We've got planes crashing. We have impacts to our schools and communities, our elderly. We need answers. So we're thinking of getting several groups together, League of Women Voters, AARP, NDFU, others, and putting a very legitimate ask out. We'd like to have a town hall so we can talk to you about these issues. Finally, these last couple, when you're comfortable, you can jump right in and run for governor or not. Take it slow. I know people who've
School board.
I've known people we've got Katrina Christensen in Jamestown. She wasn't even involved in the party, and she runs for U.S. Senate. She was a great candidate. She ran twice. Great candidate. But look, once you're comfortable with these things and you get the background that you need, take a look at that school board. Like I said, that's where the action is. That's what they've been targeting for at least 25 years. Run for school board. Run for the county commission. Run for the city council. And after a while, if you're going, this is going well, I like this. And those who are adventurous may want to consider a state legislative seat. You don't have to jump into it 2 feet first and tackle the biggest fish out there. Get comfortable with the system. Find where you fit in. Don't do things that affect your mental and physical health. But there are ways to work through this bit by bit that make a lot of sense for you if you identify the things that we've talked about that matter to you. And then finally, I'm going to say one other thing. What else is important to make things work? We had a group of, well, it was around the country, protest day at state capitals at noon. In Bismarck, it was 17 below. Wind chill was probably 25 to 30 below today. But there were a bunch of folks that said that they were going to go up there. And so, you know what? They're going to make that sort of commitment. So was I. I bundled up, went up there, stood with them for 15 minutes to show solidarity. And another thing so I showed up. I just showed up. You're showing up on this call tonight. My Interfaith Alliance of North Dakota would have quit 2 years ago if folks weren't showing up on my calls and asking questions, and then showing up on my next calls and bringing friends. They've been successful beyond my expectations, my wildest expectations, but you've got to have people show up. And then only one last thing, Renee. Y'all are going to be seeing folks, friends. You're going to see them at Easter, maybe over the Frozen Four. And Ray Kim out of International Center for Religion and Diplomacy shared this with me at when he was talking at an event we were doing. Curious, not furious. We're dealing with a lot of good people who have been played. We need to find ways to help them be the good people that they are. Now, there's a lot of Christian nationalists out there, a lot of folks out there who aren't going to have anything to do with us, never will. But there are a lot of good folks, salt of the earth, and we need to find ways to help them understand where we're coming from and how they've been played. So go into it curious, not furious. Don't start out angry. Start out asking questions. Find common ground. And when I've used it myself, that's been by far the best way that I get to a successful conclusion with relationships of people I really like. There you go. I'll
Thanks,
stop
Ross.
there.
Great, great, great. Final thoughts on how to be curious, ask questions instead of getting angry. I love it. So we got a couple questions. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm not going to put the questions on the recording.